Dinjusinzi, Kokos Ramapo, Makwa, Sakam Chief Perry, Ninde Lenape, Ato, Ramapo, Munsee, Lenape, Anishikisha Lamokwang, Anishikwachi Manitou, Elamiliang, Kanerahtiio, Walk Mbi, Walk Kashung, Walk Tindao, Anishik, 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 Anishik. And what I said in English, well, first we came to you in the Munsee language, the original language of Manhattan and these lands. And the Munsee language was almost killed off as an active language. But it'll always be here in the place names like Manhattan. That's a Munsee word. There's over 800 languages spoken in this region, but until recently, Munsee was not among those 800 active languages. And what I said in English was a prayer of thanks. I introduced myself and Chief Perry. We're both of the Deer clan of the Ramapo people, the descendants of the Munsee people, of the greater Lenape peoples. And what I said was a prayer of thanks to creation, thanks to who created us from thought, thanks to what is often translated as Great Spirit for giving us the earth, the waters, wind, and fire, a prayer of thanks for creation. And I recently learned that some of our language teachers actually have been quite well influenced by Haudenosaunee people of the Longhouse. And that I understand that oftentimes the people of the Longhouse will start their deliberations and their prayers, and when they do it in the traditional manner with prayers of thanks that will go on for quite some time. But I'll be honest with you, I still have a lot of Munsee to learn, so my prayer was quite short. And what I'd like to do is move on to some of the other indigenous peoples, and but I just want to give a special thanks to my friend and colleague here, Roger Jock, Kanerahtiio. And just to say that this is a hugely important matter. We're not only looking at, of course, our generation, but 7 generations down the line. So we're very concerned about the negative impacts of the proposed project, and are here in support of our relations there up there in Quebec, the Anishnabe people as well. So thank you for this opportunity to speak from our homelands here. And just one more note is that although we call the river here the Hudson, the indigenous name for the Hudson is the Mahikanatuk, the river that flows both ways. And I just wanted to make that last point there. So thank you very much, Anishik.
Chief Perry?
Yeah. Wanabashu, Nagiki, Benmi Bakumakwa, Netelamapo, Wabashishio Dewey, Debiwa, Ramapo, Lenape, Munsee. I'd like to welcome everyone in a real good way and to ask each and every person here present and listening to stand forward and to begin to do good acts. Global warming, destruction of the climate and our Mother Earth is not a theoretical thing. It has already been done. And perhaps the most telling story right now is that Lake Powell has dropped 150 feet. The water level has dropped down 150 feet. And not only do the earth, but the millions of people rely upon that water source. With the destruction of what's going on with the tar sands and going on in Canada with the lake, that could well be the closing chapter for us, we here on Turtle Island. So I would encourage each and every one of you to become not just active and good, but to do good acts and to share and do kindness daily. There's no more time to rely on the niceties of tomorrow. So let me send a good way to each and every one of you and ask that each and every one of you stand forward now in a real good way. Anishik, Ilungumati, Anishik, oh, thank you.
Roger?
You're on mute.
Sego. Tegos Arguello. All my brothers, my sisters, all life, we acknowledge you today and we give thanks for you all for participating in everything that we do each day. So, anyawa se juego, ne nyawa se juego diso, ne skana agahage, chite kayo ene kanto jake ne skana ananusige. So, again, we come with peace in our minds, and we continue to promote peace, because all we have today is ourselves to work together to come to a peaceful mind, a peaceful way of doing things today. And one thing is to reconcile on so many parts and so many things that has happened in the past, to bring it to full circle now and be aware of what's going on around us, and that we can work together, collaborate with one another, to talk about all these issues pertaining to Mother Earth. Chief Perry touched on some serious things that are happening right in front of us. So what are we going to do but come together and see if we can come to a better understanding of creation. So with that, I want to say Nyawa for having me here to be part of this. Nyawa Goa Skan.
Amy?
Ulakut, Ilanasi, Amy Vunga, Inuvunga. My name is Amy Norman. I'm an Inuk woman born and raised in Happy Valley Goose Bay, Labrador, and my family ties are to Nain and Northwest River in Nunatsiavut. I'm here to talk about the issue that kind of brought me into this world of we'll say climate justice and environmental advocacy, which is methylmercury contamination. I kind of joined in with the Labrador Land Protectors in the end of 2016 at the height of the resistance to Muskrat Falls. So that Muskrat Falls is a large hydro dam about 30 kilometers upstream from where I am today, my hometown. And the issue that kind of galvanized all this resistance was methylmercury contamination. So, and I am specifically kind of focusing a lot on Muskrat Falls because that is what's, in my backyard. But this issue applies to every hydro dam. So it is not unique to Muskrat Falls. It is found across every single large-scale hydroelectric dam. So I'd like you to keep that in mind. But methylmercury, it's a harmful neurotoxin that can cause Minamata disease. So it can cause things like developmental disorders in children, numbness in your hands and feet, memory issues, hearing and speech problems. It's really, really serious. And it happens because there's mercury that is naturally occurring in all vegetation, but when vegetation is submerged in water, it gets converted to the harmful methylmercury form. And the way that this molecule exists, it bioaccumulates in fat. So the water, it's in the water, and then the little plankton and little creatures eat and get some level of mercury, and then as it goes up the food web, it builds up and builds up. So the smaller fish eat the plankton, larger fish eat those fish, the seals eat those fish. It keeps building up. And we eat the seals and we eat the fish. And this buildup, the way it specifically bioaccumulates in fat is particularly harmful to us as Inuit, because our traditional diet is very rich in fat. as Inuit, we still rely on hunting and fishing and harvesting. Our traditional diet, it provides basically the only source of healthy food here in the North. There's very little else that's available because of, really dramatic food insecurity. We cannot depend on store-bought foods because it is so absurdly expensive. And when our food webs are contaminated like this, it severs not only our links to our traditional diet and healthy ways of eating, but it also severs our link to our culture, because hunting and fishing and harvesting, it nourishes the body, but it also nourishes the mind and the spirit. That's how we practice our culture, is being out on the land and going hunting and fishing with our family. So the contamination, not only is it like a physical threat to our bodies and our food webs, it's also a threat to our whole selves holistically, our spirits and our cultures. Already before the Muskrat Falls Dam that exists right now, the Inuit in our area, we already have underlying mercury levels that are 2 to 2.5 times higher than the average Canadian. This is because of decades of methylmercury buildup from another dam further upstream, about 300 kilometers away, called Churchill Falls. So we're already starting from a higher baseline. You add Muskrat Falls on top of it, it's projected to increase mercury levels by up to 1,500%. And now they're talking about a third proposed dam on our river. This is going to push Inuit into critically dangerous levels of mercury exposure. And yeah, like I said, we're already starting from that higher baseline. We're, being exposed further by Muskrat Falls, and they're proposing a third dam, Gull Island. It's supposed to be almost 3 times bigger than Muskrat Falls and Churchill Falls. So what we're talking about is an enormous increase on scales that are really hard to comprehend. And this is a real scary threat, especially as Inuit, especially because we still rely on the land and we still, it's who we are. So I just wanted to highlight this, and I share, it's not unique to our river, it's all rivers. You'll find that there's research out there. Virtually every megadam in what's currently known as Canada is within 100 kilometers of an Indigenous community. So no matter where this hydropower is coming from, it is disproportionately impacting Indigenous people. It is harming our ways of life. It's harming our cultures. And we really need to think about the generations to come and what it means, and recognize that hydropower is not the answer we're looking for. It is not safe for us. It is harmful to the environment. It's harmful to us as Indigenous peoples. And it's not the answer. So I appreciate you being here today and listening to, all of this information, and for allowing me to share kind of my story and what got me involved. Nakamisuak, thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Chief Whiteduck, you'll be asked to unmute. Okay, we'll come back around. Will Nicholls, if you could *6, you can come off of mute.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. My name is William Nicholls. I'm from Mistissini. I'm a Cree from there. We have had extensive experience with Hydro-Quebec. They created the La Grande complex within our area. They've diverted rivers, etc. During the initial phases, there were, of course, no consultations with Crees. This seems to be almost a corporate policy of Hydro-Quebec. as we see they have done this to other First Nations. Within our territory, once they built the dams and did the power lines to the south, an interesting fact is, as a defoliant, they used Agent Purple. Agent Purple is a cousin of Agent Orange, which was used in Vietnam, except for Agent Purple attacks the more the liver. And basically, we found this out through animals and whatnot. And when we looked into it, we basically found that it was only used within the Cree territory itself. Once it reached non-native communities, they switched over to something that was less toxic. So that's an interesting fact. Also, I run a First Nations news magazine called The Nation here in Quebec. At one point, we were looking for their emergency or contingency plans in case there was any problems with the dams. They claimed proprietary knowledge that it was worth money. We took them to court, looking for the information, and brought out the fact that every other utility within Canada and the United States released emergency plans to the public. It still took us a year to find that out, and then we found out all of the stuff was out of date. Within the dams that they have at the moment, the Le Grand Complex, is that what you have to understand, these are not traditional style dams that you would see in the States where they take a valley or something and they dam the head of it. These are very shallow dams. As a result of the shallowness of them, they inundate or flood immense areas. However, with electricity usage fluctuating, it creates what they call dead zones. Dead zones are up to 1 kilometer wide in some cases on our land. These are just because water's used, it recedes, whatnot, comes back, but nothing can live in those zones. It's usually the most productive areas of the Cree territory up north. Now it's not. Along with it, we're looking at, since the river diversions, this has affected the environment in a couple of ways. One is it deprives nutrients flowing not only into the James Bay, which goes into Hudson Bay and into the oceans. Those nutrients are now diminished, which is affecting populations of marine wildlife. The other thing it affects is eelgrass. Eelgrass requires very specific salinity levels, which can differentiate apparently from area to area. But by all of a sudden diverting those rivers, it no longer gets the salinity levels that it's used to. This is affecting migratory birds, such as the geese and that, which should be affecting those people who are interested in geese. It's also one of our main food sources. It's a problem with that. The methyl mercury has been discussed before, but that is something that does affect us. They have said because of other foods coming in that are not as healthy, are not that we should go back to eating some of the fish, because fish is traditionally a quarter of the Cree diet. You know, our saying was, it's the first and the last food you eat, because when you're a baby, you don't have any teeth, and usually at the end of your life, you have a lot less teeth too. So there's there. You're looking at, this is, large scale dams like this are as bad as coal burning plants in terms of climate change. So giving them the carbon tax credits or whatever they're calling it down south is simply not in keeping with the philosophy of that type of assistance to corporations. You're also looking at the fact that there is a lack of capacity. I mean, they're saying they're not going to be building new dams or that. They can use existing power. Fact is, they asked New York City, not to use as much power this winter during the cold spikes. They also asked the city of Montreal. They asked even Cree communities to cut down on power usage. So my question is, given not only the power that they're trying to sell to New York, but the power that they're trying to sell to Massachusetts, where are they going to get it from? Of course, they're going to be coming back into native lands because they don't want to upset non-First Nations communities. However, they are perfectly willing to do it to our communities. And this is part of the problems I have there. I will be available for questions later on. And I thank you for the time that I've had to be able to present part of the Cree viewpoint.
Thank you, Will. Lucien?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Well, miigwech to everyone who are present today. Anishnabe Kitigan the outside minute and Anishnabe mon cabbage madzimaget and Chunidanogum Manena Nuk Gijamogatic with the we meet Gigantic Anishnabe and such Kaminan Mamaded Minor. Thank you, everyone. I wanted to thank everyone for their presence today. I think this is a major issue for, I believe, all First Nations, whatever they are, USA or Canada, whatever the place where we live today. First Nations are first and mostly the one who are impacted by those dams, those Hydro-Quebec, projects that they're going to be doing, because they're doing so right now. And so this is not something that's always in the past. It's still present today. What we hear us in Quebec and Canada is that Hydro-Quebec will be, doing some more projects. To me, in our eyes, this is very sad. It impacts our people, our children, our women. Because we still use the land. We still, in our diet, use the traditional food. We go in the territory, we live in the territory. We have our education, our culture still in the territory. And the waters are mostly important to us all as human beings. Because human beings have rights. First Nations have rights. And water is so important to everyone, all living creatures, because water is life. This is what we say, water is life. I call this a cultural genocide. That's the impact that we have. It's a cultural genocide. So for those of us who live and use the waters and the land, that's what the impacts are. Those are major impacts that we live daily on our side. This is not being said, by the major media. It's not, our story is not really well told. We have a few seconds that we appear sometimes in the media, but that's not sufficient to give a good picture, the right story. So this is something that needs to be corrected. And Hydro-Quebec needs to be corrected if they, do anything on the land, because on our side, as Anishnabe people, Algonquins, we have unceded territory. We do not have any treaties with any one of those governments, provincial or federal governments. We don't have any treaties with them. We don't want to go that direction because we don't want to cede any part of our territories, traditional territories. So we are sovereign in our territories. They don't want to hear it. Governments, they don't want to hear that. But we talk about it, we raise the issues, and we want that to be respected. Because, like I said, children are impacted. For the last, 40 years, and it's been like that. They're ignoring our people. They're ignoring our leadership. This is, it needs to be corrected right now. This is something that we need to talk about, and that New Yorkers need to hear about. What's happening in Quebec, within the Anishinabeg territories, within First Nations territories. The young lady who just spoke before me said it very well. And we have those impacts. And this is a long-term impact. It's going to be more than one generation if that thing's, mercury, and because we eat the fishes, many kind of fishes. The wildlife that goes near and around those rivers and lakes are, still there. And it's our traditional diet, traditional food. And we need to state those things. People need to understand what's really happening on the ground. This is something that Hydro-Quebec will never say in public. They don't want to say those things. But yet, they're still advancing and talking about those projects. They have, lobbies in the USA and in Canada too, but we as First Nation, we don't have much. We're trying to do our best as, with the leverage that we have, but we don't have much. We still see much of our communities living in third world conditions. Housing is lacking. There's not enough housing in those communities. Even in the land, there's those cabins, if I can call those cabins, they can't live there always in the wintertime, because we do have people living in the land 12 months a year. So this is something that's need to be said. At this time, when I came across because I'm, this week I went to Montreal, I seen those lakes and rivers are really, really low. Dead zones that about 100 and 200 feet wide. Those lakes are really low at this time of the year. And now it's the spawning season for the walleye fish. But the waters are so low that has another impact on the, the fishes that are spawning right now. So that's not being said, and there's dangerous zones where we can't go anymore because of the ice is and falling, and the water is really low. So there's dangerous areas that we can't go anymore because of the waters that's so low, and the ice is falling all over the place. So like I said, in our eyes, it's a cultural genocide. That's not right. They say it's a green energy. We don't believe that because the impacts on First Nation of our people and children and women are so major. We cannot call it green energy. We don't have, and we don't benefit any of it at this time, and we never had. So this is something that needs to be corrected. I'm hoping that New Yorkers will be advised and understand the situation and say, if this continues like that, at least you need to talk to us. They need to talk to us. We need to correct that right now. So I'm hoping that people will understand that. So with that, thank you, Chimigwich, everyone. Oh.
Thank you, Lucien. Chief Whiteduck.
Hey, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, wherever everyone else is from and located at. First I want to acknowledge and thank everyone for participating in the the dialogue last week for what we had to say. I think it was important. I think our message was well heard and received. So I just want to say kudos to everyone who voiced and their concerns and their feedback and everything that had to be said. The team here, the Riverkeepers, and getting us all together and getting us on the floor with those representatives who, you know, heard us basically. And you know, I'm very proud of the team and the success that we're all doing here, ensuring that this doesn't portray or move forward with in regards to the state's purchasing Hydro-Quebec power or whatever other provinces, you know. So, you know, that's my message today, is just say congrats and good job, everyone. Lucien is a very well-informed, very knowledgeable person. He was actually the Grand Chief for so many years. He's a very well-respected man in our Algonquin nation, and he everything he had to say, I echo what he had to say. It's absolutely true. The governments here in Canada do not support and do not want to recognize the unceded people, and you know, it's scary for them. It really is, because they don't want to extinguish and lose that title to the land, right? So they'll never say it, and you know, and so that's the message I want to leave with. I'm more of an observer today than anything else, and but I just wanted to give you that key message. Good job, everyone. Good question.
Thank you, Chief Whiteduck. Thank you, Grand Chief McGregor and Lucien. Roberta.
Hi, everyone. I'm Roberta Benefiel, and I'm situated in Happy Valley Goose Bay, like Amy Norman, downstream from Muskrat Falls, which is not yet operating, but is built. And I want to say thank you to the media for being here, because without the media, it is very difficult for us to get our message out to the people who need to hear it. And we so appreciate you taking the time to be here with us today, and be aware that I think I speak for all of us, that if there are any of these issues that bring questions to your mind, please reach out. And also, I believe there's a document with a full list of links to various peer-reviewed studies and articles that will be very helpful to you. So please ask for those when you need them. So first, let me acknowledge that I live and work on the traditional homelands of the Inuit of the north of Labrador, which is Nunatsiavut, where Amy belongs, and also the Inuit of southern Labrador, Nunatuavut, and also the Innu Nation of central and south central Labrador. So the previous presenters up to now have given you a lot of impacts on their communities locally, and how all of the huge monster dams in Quebec have impacted them. I want to make sure that you understand one thing, that the Churchill Falls project in Labrador, which was built in about 1967, came on stream in 1972, is basically all the power, well, over 90% of the power from that project is owned by Hydro-Quebec until the contract, the power purchase contract, is up in 2041. So at any given moment, when power is produced and sent to New York or to any other part of Canada or New York, you must understand that that power could be coming from Churchill Falls on the Churchill River, which we call the traditional name Mistissini, which is Inuk, or the Grand River, which was the old trapper's name for it. So we hope you'll investigate all of these impacts further, and please reach out if you have any questions, and I'm happy to answer them. And I'm sure I'm speaking for most everybody on this call. So I just want to touch on a few of the impacts that are not just local, but are global in scope, and remind everyone that there are about 70,000 megadams in the world, and they're all doing the same thing. They're all producing methyl mercury. They're all holding nutrients behind the dams. And by doing that, they are desiccating the fisheries in the estuaries and the fisheries downstream from any of these projects. They are also holding silica in the sediment, and diatoms are not receiving enough silica to build their little bodies. And just a reminder that silica for diatoms, diatoms actually produce about 25 to 30% of the oxygen that the entire world breathes. And we have lots of documents to show that, different studies, okay? So that's a global issue. And the amounts of things that are happening with these impacts, it's just astounding. And that's where we started as a small group in Labrador, looking at just our river. But the more we learned over the last 25 or 30 years, the more we realized that, you know, these dams they're destroying fisheries and they're creating warmer waters in the wrong time of the year, and actually creating climate change. They are a big contributor to climate change. And of course, nobody is speaking about that. And in that list of documents that Rebecca will share with you if you need them, there's a few documents from Dr. Bradford Hager of MIT, where Dr. Hager has done some new modeling. I'm sorry about the puppy, but she just arrived and she will not sit on the floor without crying. So anyhow, Dr. Hager has determined that by a magnitude of like 100, the old models that were modeling the amount of greenhouse gases, including methane, that come from reservoirs and dams when they off gas as the water goes through the turbines, that has been really underestimated for years. And not only that, no country in the world currently, gives the amount of gas, greenhouse gas that's emitted from their dams. So this is something for the IPCC to look at. And as a group, a lot of dam folks went to the COP26 in Glasgow, and we presented a document to the UN about the idea that they should be looking at GHG estimates from hydro projects, because of course the proponents of these projects, which in our country is the province and the crown corporations who build them, they're greenwashing their hydro dams, and they don't want to take proper greenhouse gas emissions studies. They don't want to do that, because if they do, I think they all know that this is going to be a huge issue. So, is there anything else I can bring up that might? Okay, so we have a Dr. Taylor Mavera who has done some work for us on a couple of occasions, and there's a document in that list that I said you might be able to get a hold of, that dams are changing the world's carbon cycle significantly and negatively for the climate. That there's creations of emissions from fly ash, which is used to make concrete stronger. You may know that concrete is one of the bigger emitters in the world anyway, but when you add fly ash to make it stronger for the dams, that makes it even worse. Amy talked about the methyl mercury. That is something that is ongoing in every single dam, no matter how small the reservoir or how big the reservoir. But the shallower ones that are spread out over further, bigger areas are the worst emitters. And in fact, there are, I think it's 22 dams proposed across the north in Canada right now at this moment. And of those 22, 11 of them are considered to be worse than Muskrat Falls, which is the dam that was just built as far as methyl mercury goes. And also they are within 100 kilometers of an indigenous community. So here again, I know that in New York, the coal-fired plants and those emissions and everything are always in communities of color and communities that are unable to fight the fight. And this is exactly what happens in Canada. These big dams are built on indigenous lands, as everyone has said so far, that they can't fight it because, number one, they're fighting the biggest power and the most money. And it's very difficult for them to fight these projects and try to get some kind of, consultation process going on. So the list goes on and on. I could go on forever with, not forever maybe, but quite a bit longer with the impacts. There is one thing I want to mention. I think it was Will who mentioned that Hydro-Quebec will have to increase power. Well, exactly true, because just last week in La Devois, an interview with Sophie Brochu, and she said, yeah, by 2027, they feel that hydro dams will have to be built because they feel like the increase in demand is going to go up to a point where they can't provide services. So, like this January, when Hydro-Quebec went out to all their customers and said, please turn your thermostat down already. And yet they are saying that they can produce power for New York and Massachusetts at peak times. And we don't believe that's true. We believe they will have to build new dams. And we understand through the United States rules and regulations that any power from new dams is not permitted, especially for a tier 4 credit, which means it's green. And we understand that tier 4 absolutely should not be given to the Chippy project, simply because of all of these different impacts. So thank you very much. And I'm more than available for any questions or to refer you to any documents you need. And again, thank you so much. The media is so needed in this issue, on these issues. Thank you again.
Thank you, Roberta. Annie.
Yeah, hello, good morning, everyone. I'm Annie Wilson, and I work with the I'm Annie Wilson, and I work for the New York Environmental Justice Project out of New York City, and I'm a co-founder of the North American Megadams Resistance Alliance. And thanks for attending, and I will cover issues more on the New York side, although the issues relate to each other, both the Hudson River, the impacts of the installation of the cables, and what is taking place with the mega dams that have been built throughout the northeast of so-called Canada onto Indigenous lands. Well, I'll first address as a segue to what Roberta was stating, relating to the accounting of the methane. And there are other emissions with the methyl mercury and the carbon that have been ignored by New York State. And there is, within New York, a new rule at the DEC that requires counting electricity emissions from imports. But they've defined that as combustion only. They're not looking at the methane emissions and other emissions caused by the mega dams for these so-called imports that we hope we will be able to block pending a decision tomorrow by the New York Public Service Commission. There were over 100 organizations in the United States about a month ago that signed a petition to the administrator of the EPA, Michael Regan, to request that the EPA exercise its authority to initiate rulemaking to add dams and reservoirs as a source category for the greenhouse gas reporting program. This is a very important development and needs to be considered by the state regarding any imports of hydro produced by mega dams built on indigenous lands. The second issue I would like to address as emissions is within the city. We have peaker plants that have been plaguing the city for decades. Around 20 years ago, there was a decision that came out of the environmental justice community in New York City that required the state to count the PM 2.5 emitted by these power plants, these peaker plants. And there is a program with the New York Power Authority that would require a transition away from the peaker plants towards battery storage or other mitigation measures. This is an important development in New York City, and the New York Power Authority has not been moving fast enough to transfer those peaker plants to the mitigation measures or transform their systems to alleviate the burden of the environmental justice communities that are suffering as a result of the pollution caused by these peaker plants. The next issue is the fact that Hydro-Quebec has recently admitted in their report that came out 2 weeks ago in their strategic plan 22-26 that come 2027, they will need to add to their capacity and have not ruled out building more dams. And the New York ISO, which is New York Independent System Operator here in New York, made a presentation in March regarding the peak use for New York, which will be in 2023 in January. So due to the electrification of everything and these trends and the requirements by the CLCPA, Community Leadership, Climate Leadership Community Protection Act, where there's a requirement of 70% reductions come 2030, we're looking at a peak demand shifting from July to January. So therefore, importing from Hydro-Quebec in this context, when they're short, they have a shortage come 2027. We have a peak shift in New York come 2033. Just on that basis alone, in addition to the impacts onto the communities here and the indigenous communities impacted by the dams, there is no logical reason for supporting this program of the Tier 4 RECs towards Hydro-Quebec. I'll conclude with the fact that the mayor of New York has already budgeted $75 million towards 2026, and that they have estimated that in the next 25 years, New York City will be paying $2 to $4 billion for this power through the Blackstone Champlain Hudson Power Express. in New York, we are much better off promoting efficiency, conservation, and in-state renewables, such as what is to be delivered by the competing permit or competing contract, the Clean Path New York. The claims made by the developers, Blackstone, one of the largest private equity firm on the planet, and the misleading campaigns and taking advantage of First Nations and misrepresentation of the issues relating to the dams built and promising the alleviation of pollution in the same communities, whether it be Asma Alley, Queens, or in the Bronx, is immoral. And they've also made claims that the savings to the consumer in New York will be $17 billion in 30 years. No, they will be making the savings as income to the developer and the investors. So I have documents if you wish to contact me relating to the states I have spoken on. And I want to conclude that all rivers everywhere need to be protected. Up north, the Hudson River does not need to be a transmission corridor with over 250,000 cubic yards of sediment disturbance for the installation of these cables that will be left and abandoned in perpetuity by these developers. Let's think local, let's think global. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Annie. We're going to close today's event with Chief Perry.
Yeah, I'd like to thank everyone for their input and the brilliance and time and effort you put in. But I see a very big flaw in the entire approach. To my indigenous relatives in Canada, we got a term for what's been happening to you. We experience it daily right here in New York. It's called Jim Crow. Jim Crow's when the powers listen, pat you on the head and do nothing, go around and basically lie to you in your face while you think you've gone someplace. Let me make a couple general suggestions that may help the situation nationally and internationally. For us Native people, the number one core is to really unite. And I don't mean like, yeah, we're friends and cousins. I mean to unite in activity. And most important is to unite behind our allies, such as the Riverkeepers and Annie Wilson and et cetera, to people who have the wherewithal and the knowledge of how to massage the situation corporately. There's a couple things, for instance, there's a couple things we can do corporately that we haven't done that may give us some voice in terms of stopping it, because a lot of damage that's being done by stockholders and other people is that it's unintentional. Unintentional, an example would be people have gone to Hawaii and completely displaced the entire Hawaiian population simply because maybe they wanted a house on a beautiful mesa. They didn't realize by buying that land out from under the tribal people there, they would become homeless. So what I'm getting at is this. Let me suggest that each agency, group, tribe, or whatever we're doing with, buy at least one share of stock in whatever corporation that is doing the most damage. Now, what will that do? That will allow you to have a voice at the stockholders meeting. Right now, you're with a cardboard sign yelling out in the street. Nobody cares. Turn up the air conditioner and shut the shades. So number one, I'd say to get in the door. Number two, I think if we could collectively and perhaps off screen get together with our allies to where we can provide a robust, unified voice to our allies that have the wherewithal in terms of knowledge to carry it forward would be the way to go. I think there's a lot of good work being done, but we are allowing ourselves to be dysfunctional by not allowing ourselves to unite in a bigger body. So I would like to urge everyone to really think about in which ways perhaps we can unite. And I mean, unite today, I would suggest that the tribal people, as soon as we can, perhaps sit down together and find out how we can become active so that we can truly support our allies that are supporting us, because quite frankly, ain't nobody care about no Indians. I don't want to be cold-hearted. I'm a New Yorker. I live here in right in the seat of, we're still experiencing land rush here. I live 30 miles outside of Manhattan. They think if you got a 2 or 3 bedroom house, you're dirt, you ought to move. So I can relate to what you're going through. So rather than go on and on and on, just let me say, rather than continue to be dysfunctional, let us get together in a confab, put together an actual doable project that we can use globally, let's say, to go forward and get the job done. We're not going to get it done by recognizing the problem. We need to be able to affect the economy of it and have a viable alternative. And right now, Mr. Putin's they're talking about oil. So of course, Mr. Biden's going to be talking about wind and hydro. So I just want to urge everyone, let's do good. Let's get together and sit down and come out with a real program that's going to work. Being who we are, where we are, without voice and without allies is not going to happen. So I don't hate to be grim, but let me thank you all for that moment. And I think Beverly can give you you can find my contacts. I'll put my contacts up for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Perry. Thanks to the First Nations and communities for your statements today. We'd like to open it up for the press. Great, we have our first question. Lisa Harris. You should be able to talk now.
Hi, yes, I think I'm unmuted. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. And I apologize, I'll be a little long-winded with my question here. Let me just first tell you where I'm coming from. I work for a news outlet called The River, which is Hudson Valley and Catskills based. And I'm from the Catskills in upstate New York. We are the area where New York City's water comes from. I'm in the New York City watershed, and we have a history here of in living memory of New York City seizing land by eminent domain, and we live with the reservoirs and with that relationship with New York City. And I'm very well aware of how fraught these relationships around water and around the taking of land can be, although obviously not from the same perspective. I also just want to acknowledge that I am on Lenape land. We were, a seasonal home of the Lenape during the summertime, primarily, is my understanding of it. And my question is, okay, with the respect to the fact that you're not responsible for New York City's problems, my understanding of the situation here is that the city has pretty substantial transmission bottlenecks. And because of that, as Annie was talking about, they rely very heavily on these natural gas, these fracked gas power plants, mostly in Black and brown neighborhoods in the city, that are not only worsening the climate crisis and relying on a gas whose own methane emissions have been undercounted by industry. They're also creating a ton of particulate air pollution that is sickening and killing people in neighborhoods in New York City. There are other projects that are moving forward to try to alleviate some of that transmission bottleneck and get more renewable energy into the city. Annie mentioned Clean Path. There's also offshore wind projects in development. But this is not an either or situation, because those projects are not enough to meet enough of New York City's power needs to be able to start retiring those peaker plants and move away from natural gas use. This project that we're speaking of today has been in the works for more than a decade. As some of you may know, Riverkeeper supported it a decade ago. They've now changed their position on it. These projects are incredibly fraught. They take an incredible amount of time. And as we in the climate world all know from the IPCC reports, that's time we don't have to spare. So, my question, I guess, is, is it worth it? Should New York shut down this project, even if it means another 10 or 15 years of New York City running those peaker plants and continuing to poison people in their own neighborhoods, because that's how long it takes to develop an alternative? Or, are there alternatives that are ready to go on that could be switched to? It's my understanding that there aren't, and that this is a trade-off choice. So I'm hoping that folks want to address that. And also an additional question is, if New York does go forward with this project, are there ways that New York State can reduce the harm to your communities?
Thank you, Lisa. Panelists, if you scroll down to the bottom under the more, you'll see a raise hand function. If you'd like to answer Lisa's questions, please raise your hand and I'll call on you. Thanks. Annie Wilson.
Yes. My answer is, Lisa, to please explore the potential for the Transco, TRANSCO upgrades that have not been permitted to partake in this Tier 4. And these are upgrades that can connect to New York City within New York to provide electricity to so-called unclog the bottlenecks, as industry has been stating. But I do want to add that there is a legal requirement in New York City for 80% of peak capacity to be produced in New York City. And even though we've always heard the Indian Point, 25% New York City, et cetera, no. There's an in-city requirement for 80% capacity. And bringing in power is an option via the existing grid and its upgrades. We don't need to look to Chippy. And I hope the media can explore this concept. In addition, there's 9,000 megawatts of offshore wind being delivered, also through cables into the New York City region that have not been defined as of yet, but are planned. And with regard to the city itself, there has been almost no solar development. There's been a strong efficiency conservation requirement through Local Law 97 and building emission reductions. And let's look at the options that are current. And the last thing about the peaker plants is please search NYPA and the peaker plants and the agreements that have been made towards transforming the peaker plants towards other measures, mitigation measures, and battery storage. We do not need the Champlain Hudson Power Express in New York City.
Thank you, Annie. Lucien. Can I ask you to unmute?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for your question. I think this is something that needs to be raised more often with the media. How does that impact First Nation? How can we alleviate those impacts? Well, first of all, I think it's going to be very hard because the harms are already, there. It's been there for many years, for many decades. What we can do or try to do, I think, is that, first of all, they need to talk to us in a way and in a fashion that's going to be respectful. How do we do that? At this time, I cannot predict the future, but we know about some elements of the future. If they continue like that, ignoring our people, ignoring our rights, ignoring the impacts on our direct impacts on our people, they might be saying, well, this is the past, and come out of it. That's the language we hear from many of those colonized, language or mentality. That's where they come from. This is something that's going to be hard. Can we compensate, alleviate, try to find solution? I think there's some options or possibilities, but they need to have that open mind, and they need to have that open heart, open spirit, and explore those solutions with us. But you know, the dams, if they're still there, because we know they're going to be there for the next 50 years again. So how do we alleviate those impacts? That's what I'm saying. It's going to be very hard. But you know, we can try to find solutions, but a very short-term solution, that's going to be hard. But at least if they start talking seriously with us, we could probably explore some options or try to find solutions with them, because we are open to discuss with them. But you know, the conditions needs to be there, and that's where I'm. You know, that's where we're going, trying to find solutions. But there are things that we cannot change. I'm sure they won't be, you know, talking about taking away their dams or the power lines that are already in the lands of our people. But you know, that's the kind of discussion that some of the discussions or elements of discussion that we could raise. But at the same time, we're realistic. What's happening and what's going to be happening very soon, and we're trying to find solutions here. But you know, those are plasters. I call it plaster solutions, but the damage is already so big, and it's going to be hard to alleviate that. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucien. Amy?
Hi, yeah, I wanted to touch on part of your question too. I don't believe for a second that the option is, you know, continuing harming Black and Brown communities in your city or continuing harming Indigenous communities in Northern Canada. Like those, to put it like that, is such a false dichotomy. And I think that's purposeful industry spin. I don't think that's accurate. And I think to kind of like frame it as pitting marginalized communities, oh, we're either harming ourselves locally or harming someone we can't see. I think that's just like blatantly not true. I think there are so many creative solutions out there. I just think that from all levels of government across borders, there is a lack of courage to explore solutions that aren't these like status quo, that aren't backed by these like multi-billion-dollar corporations. So I think it's really important, especially as journalists, to kind of cut through the industry BS, realize that it's not like the only solutions are not either harming marginalized communities here or harming marginalized communities elsewhere. There are solutions that can work for everyone. We just have to be brave and look for them and go for it. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Chief Perry.
Yes, thank you. There's one almost immediate a beginning of a solution we can enjoy almost immediately for the indigenous communities is register and vote. And very nearly every community in the country, and I'm sure in Canada, that the majority of the native population doesn't vote, but it provides, of course, I've got, let me hang this phone up here. What I was suggesting is everybody register to vote and vote as a block. That means that you have the potential in many elections, even though you're not the majority population, but as a voting block, you have a swing vote that essentially will allow you to control who's being put in power and what they're doing. And that can be done almost immediately. So I would suggest, number one, for the communities to get together and perform a voting block and to use it effectively. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Perry. Owl? And
Roger Jock would like to have a word here.
Yeah, I just want to pick up on what I've been hearing so far. Sounds good. And we have to, I think, bring awareness to the elephant in the room. So, and talk about these issues that really are impacting our communities on what has happened, what was done, and what has it created within our territories. And NYPA is a big one and has to address these issues, even with the Mohawk. And I think there's a big issue here, and I think this is going to be the catalyst right now, I think, to go forward to get things moving in all our directions that we come from. So this is great, and I think that we really have to talk about what's that word? Reparations.
So what was the impact of the dams in your guys' area?
Yeah, the impact, of the dam and what it has created. Great big manufacturing facilities, big corporate that has totally destroyed the ecosystem in around the dam itself by cheap power. Now these big corporations came in and they just totally contaminated with PCBs and everything in our territory. We need to go back there and look at that big elephant in the corner of the room. So I just wanted to bring that back to point,
Thank you, Roger. Tracy Brown?
Hi, thank you. Thanks everybody for your time today. This is such an important discussion, and Riverkeeper is really happy to host and support this platform. I just wanted to respond to two questions that Lisa Harris brought up. Lisa, you asked about alternative projects and how long it'll take for those to get on the ground. So, and also peaker plants. So I want to just highlight there's a great op-ed in the Daily News today from Eddie Batista, who is the head of the Environmental Justice Alliance in New York City. And Eddie took on this issue of the false expectation that we're going to get rid of peaker plants if we bring Canadian hydro into the city. The Hydro-Quebec proposal through Chippy does not include year-round energy supply. So as I think was raised earlier, there's no guarantee that we'll get winter energy from this project. And the winter season is going to become our peak energy need season as people move towards doing more electrifying of power and heating sources. So we'll really have to keep those peaker plants if this is the project that goes forward. There are also alternative plants, and there has been a number of false narratives that the folks who are behind the Hydro-Quebec Chippy project have really successfully propagated in the news. And Amy touched on one of them, this idea that we have to, kind of choose between the people who are going to be at the polluting end of the transmission line, either at the source or at the receiving community. And that is a false choice. Another one that has gotten out there is that our choice is either this hydropower or natural gas and fossil fuel. And that is just not the choice at all. There were 7 projects that competed for the Tier 4 funding. Chippy and the Clean Path project were the 2 that have been selected and are being considered. There were 5 other candidate projects, and based on the urgency and more resources and emphasis on getting renewable energy to New York City, it's reasonably anticipated that an alternative project could be at the point that Chippy is at now with permits and a lot of that groundwork in place within 2 to 3 years. So just because it took Hydro-Quebec 10 years under the political conditions we were in for the past decade to get to this point, that does not mean it's going to take another 10 years for alternative projects. And there are alternative projects available to us that would actually, using batteries and New York generated solar and wind power, allow us to meet peak demand. So that would be more effective at getting rid of peaker plants in the short term. So just wanted to put that information out there. Thank you.
Yep, thanks, Tracy. If I could just ask a quick follow-up and not to be super pointy here, but given the fact that Riverkeeper was on record as supporting this project, A, is there another project that you are prepared to support, and B, what would be, you think, how would that be received by decision makers saying, well, we don't know if they're going to continue to support this project given that they've changed their stance on this one?
Yeah, so, certainly there's been a learning curve for us, and we learned more about this project over time. And we actually had some misrepresentation from Hydro-Quebec when we were originally talking to them, and they were promoting this project to us. So as we've done our own research and come up with the facts and learned more, including connecting with the people on this call and our allies in the city, like NYJA, the New York Environmental Justice Alliance, and others, we're willing to admit when we didn't get the facts right the first time. And it's more important for us to get the facts right as we have them and learn and advocate for our core principles and our really firm belief that renewables have to come fast, but it does have to be a just transition, and that we can't use this sense of urgency that others who haven't been doing this work for decades like us now have to just kind of lower the bar and rush through what we can get done because, they're waking up to the urgency of this situation we've been talking about for decades, and working towards conservation measures and just renewable solutions for decades. So it's incredibly frustrating to be painted now as, somehow a villain because we're learning and listening and responding in real time to the options and the real conditions on the ground. So all that said about, where we've been and where we are now, I also want to say, Riverkeeper is a water protector organization, and we're not an energy organization. So we focus on the projects that impact the Hudson River watershed, and the drinking water of people within our watershed, and also the New York City watershed. So within that framework, we are looking at renewable energy that can come as quick and as clean as it can to New York City as humanly possible. We are not, promoting specific projects. We have met with several other alternative projects, and we can say that there are ones that we definitely feel are better, but I'm not here to, shrill for any one energy entity over another. But I will say that there are projects that have been under consideration that include solar and wind generated in New York State, and then coupled with battery storage within the city that will address the real energy need, which is, peaker load energy and clean renewable energies that don't, sacrifice any communities at either end of the transmission line.
Thank you.
Might I add a fact, Lisa, that in 2009, Governor Patterson blocked the New York Power Authority from continuing their preliminary negotiations with Hydro-Quebec towards a 2,000 megawatt contract. And in 1992, Governor Cuomo also put a halt to what had been a contract with Hydro-Quebec that totaled $18 billion for 2,000 megawatts. I believe that this is the third time that we can block these contracts and in New York by Hydro-Quebec. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie. We have time for one more question, if there are other questions from the press. We'll pause a moment to give you a second. Pat Bradley.
Hi, I'm with Northeast Public Radio. I'm up in their Plattsburgh bureau, which some folks may recognize as being near the Canadian border. So I've been following this for quite a while. And I'm a little bit curious with the approval of this bit coming up tomorrow. Why are you doing this today? Why haven't we seen more, you know, in the last 2 years, Zooms and stuff like this regarding the project more frequently, you know, having you guys get together like this? It just seems kind of like a, not to be negative or anything, kind of like a last ditch effort, you know, as the commission is going to be reviewing this tomorrow.
Would anyone from the panel like to speak? We see a few hands. Tracy Brown, please.
Hi, yes, Pat, I think we all wish that we had started this discussion and made these connections sooner. So I don't think we have a great response to that, just in that, you know, it's taken time to build trust. And we certainly have been working together in coalition with letters and conversation. But I think the way that the discussion has happened in the public recently, especially around misinformation and feeling that the voices from Canada weren't really getting through, just made us feel, you know, we need to make these discussions and these voices more public. So we do wish we had done it sooner, but we're grateful to be together today. And thank you for coming. We really appreciate it.
Might I add a comment, Pat, that although this project was approved by New York and then the presidential permit, the federal permit in 2014, there was no buyer for this electricity. And there were no activities towards the construction of these cables as a corridor due to that. It was in 2019 that Mayor de Blasio announced that they were negotiating with Hydro-Quebec. So this campaign had been on halt for quite a few years, and that is why there are activities now and not throughout the past 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy.
I just want to add too, like, there also have been activities for the last, I would say, at least 3 or 4 years. I personally have been on speaking tours with the North American Megadam Resistance Alliance in New York State and across all kinds of other multiple states throughout the Northeast of the US, talking about this very thing. And I was in New York City in 2019. We've held conferences, we've held press conferences, we've held panels, we've held Zooms. The events have been happening. This is not, I do not believe this is a last minute effort. I think what you're seeing now is the culmination of our hard work through years. And now we're finally getting more momentum and more momentum as we approach that deadline. So respectfully, it's not last minute. And, you know, we can happily send you Zoom links for panels from years ago if that interests you.
Sure does.
Thank you.
Sure, go to New York Northeast.
Roberta.
Yeah, I would like to say exactly what Amy is saying. I mean, we've been working at this. We went to, I personally went to New York, Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine in 2017 and spoke at 15 different community events to bring awareness of all of this. The point of all of this is that we don't have a lot of capacity as small groups, and you must understand that when you're doing battle with Goliath, that sometimes, you know, you just have to just keep picking away at it. And what happened with that little 15 community jaunt through the northeastern states was the starting of the NAMRA group, the Northeast Megadam Resistance Group, which Annie was with us, and Meg Sheehan and so many others. And as volunteers, we have done everything in our possible ability to get the message out there. And also, if you go back and check on the Chippy Project websites, you'll see that Grand Riverkeeper Labrador has made comments on those websites as often as there was possible comments to be made. So yeah, we're not last minute. We are working hard, and that's where actually the media should come in. And that's why we're working so hard right now to convince the media, you and others, that this issue, all of these issues need to be in mainstream media. We can't just keep brushing it aside. It is an important part of the discussion about megadams, and it's got to get out there. And so thank you for your question. And no, this is definitely not just a last minute effort. Thank you so much.
Yes, Pat, I have my hand raised, want to address your question, that these relationships that we've been building for over many years, that's culminated into an opportunity for Riverkeeper to facilitate an opportunity like this and to bring press in to hear directly from the directly impacted First Nations and communities in Canada, was planned long ago to help to bring these voices forward. The fact that this webinar landed the day before the PSC potential vote is something that one could say is fortuitous. It isn't something we planned in that way that I think is being suggested. So I just would like to share that with you, and glad you're here today. Thank you. And thanks to Lisa as well. Others might have a response to that. Lucien.
Yeah, thank you, Pat, for your question. For our communities on the Quebec side, I have to say that we were, not aware of things going on in the U.S. Because we're not there. We're not in the U.S. We don't really know what's really happening. We don't know the rules or regulations or laws that can apply to this kind of project. So this is something that we have to look for. We have to look for the information, and we did find some people to give us the right information, and with the Riverkeepers and Annie Wilson. And a few months back, I would say 18 months back, we were not aware that there were people fighting and trying to get their voices heard. On our side, we're very limited as within our capacity to try to raise our voices. We've been trying this for many, many years now. It's very difficult for us to be heard and to be respected by the Quebec government in Hydro-Quebec. Like one mentioned a while ago that we're trying to fight Goliath here. We're small communities here on our side. And this also needs to be heard and understood. Simply because we've been ignored for so many years, and trying to raise our voices and trying to find good allies that respects our values and give the voice of our people to be heard across the border. And it's you wouldn't imagine how things are done here in Quebec and Canada. So maybe people saying we're threatening First Nations very well, but it's not all true. You need to see, you need to come, and you will understand better, I guess, if you come around. But this being said, there's a lot of things happening right now. It's happening really quick, and we have so few of us that can speak the language. For example, speaking English, we don't speak all English. It's a French province here, and And many of my people only speak French or Anishnabe Moine. This is all they learned and when they went to school. But I'm fortunate enough, to speak the language in English. So this is why I've been chosen to speak with you today. So, this needs to be understood also. So thank you for your question, Rich.
Thank you, Lucien. Chief Perry.
Yeah, thank you. Like I said, I'm not positive if all the tribal people in Canada can vote. But what I'm hearing is, and I'd like to also address the question by the press, actually, there has been an environmental movement amongst Native Americans here for probably the last at least 20 or 30 years. And as Lucien said, you're not being heard. So what I would like to do is to reiterate what I had said earlier. If everybody registers and forms a voting block, it's possible that a few hundred people can change the vote of the entire province, simply because it's a collective vote that has not been included in the general voting. So I'm saying you do have some political clout if you use it effectively. And the other thing I said, what I was saying, is to let's ask our allies what support they need most that we can provide. And also, I seriously suggest, even to our allies, if they haven't, buy one stock, be at the board at the meeting, and make your position known. A lot of times, stockholders and even the executive of these companies, you're getting 10,000 pieces of mail. You're getting selective information too. And also keep in mind, it's about money. It's about money and power. Your vote could potentially be your power. If you present yourself right, you may have a lot of unintentional people that are unintentional, that are going to be allies, that have damaged the environment unintentionally, just thinking it's a good investment. Slow down. And you do need allies. And a good example that I always see is we have issues with trafficking. Well, we have women in New York City that knows it's a financial capital of the world. That's a different conversation than being in some beautiful state out west, just pleading your heart out where nobody's going to hear you. So I guess I don't want to run this on, but let me urge everyone to act, and to act in a good way, and to act now. And the beginning of that is simply to get your voice heard in these major corporations. It may cost you one simple thing of stock, and collectively get together and go vote. And I know natives like to vote every way they want. Everybody needs to vote for the candidate that's going to provide them. I think you're going to find allies to work with, because otherwise, everybody here is turning that big giant stone with all of their heart, but we're not moving almost fast enough to keep up with the times. So thank you. I'm just urging everyone to become politically active and corporately active, knowledgeable. They know what they're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Perry. Any closing questions before we end our event today? All right, thank you all very much for attending today's event. We hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.